Thank you. First to the president. You have a great president, by the way. He is a... Oh. They didn't even let me get the words out of my mouth. He is not only a great educator, he's a great attorney, he has a great statewide reputation, and he's a heck of a nice guy. You know what he said to me inside? He said, any student who's here today is going to get 5 points extra credit. Isn't that nice? Let's give him a round of applause. It is truly my pleasure to be back in Rochester with so many friends who are here on a very important topic. The president acknowledged the elected officials who are here. I want to send my best regards to them. To your county executive, Maggie Brooks. She's doing a great job. Let's give her a round of applause. Maggie Brooks and I are from different political parties. Maggie is are you a Democrat or Republican? I get so confused. Maggie's a Republican, and I happen to be a Democrat. But we are working together on the problems of the state, and that's the way it is supposed to be. One of the real problems we have to solve in this state is elected officials who are hyper-partisan, where it's about allegiance to party rather than doing the right thing by the people of the state. I always get a kick when you watch a legislative body. You can see it in Albany, you can see it in Washington. All the Democrats vote one way, and all the Republicans vote another way. Whatever the issue is, it can be a very obscure issue. What color should we paint the door? All the Democrats want one color, all the Republicans want the other color. It can't be, statistically, that they all agree with each other all the time. What they're really saying is they are voting by their party identification rather than what's in the best interest of the people of their district. And that's what has to stop, and that's what we're going to stop. And working together with Maggie Brooks, we're going to change the orientation. We're Democrats, we're Republicans. We are New Yorkers first, and we have to act that way. Maggie Brooks, it's a pleasure to be with you. Let's give her a round of applause. It is my pleasure to be with Barbara Duffy. The first decision I made in this job was picking a lieutenant governor candidate. I made a really great choice and have a great friend and a great partner and a phenomenal lieutenant governor for the state of New York, Bob Duffy. He's in Albany working today, but let's give him a round of applause. And when I was trying to talk Bob into doing it, he kept saying, well, Barbara. So she's more than the co-lieutenant governor. I think she's like co-plus lieutenant governor. I think she swayed it at the end of the day. We are here to talk about the state budget, which is an important exercise that the state is going through now. But frankly, in many ways, it's more important for you guys who are in school because it's more about your future than it is about my future, and this is going to be shaping the state that you're in. It's called the executive budget because it is the function of the governor. I've been in office for about 2 months. These have been 2 very long months, I want you to know. I did not have any of this gray hair when I started, but it has been an adventure. I was elected because I told the people of the state I had 3 goals that I wanted to accomplish. Number 1, I wanted to clean up Albany and give this state a government that people can be proud of, a government that's ethical, a government that has integrity, as the president was saying, a government that is free from these scandals that we've been seeing throughout the past few years. Number 2, balance the budget, fiscal responsibility. And number 3, to get the economy running again, because that's really what the government partnership is all about. It's about creating jobs, about getting the economy running, and the rest will take care of itself. In many ways, the state is at a crossroads. I think the decisions we make will determine the future of this state going forward, one way or the other, because it really is a time of big change. Given that, this is a different type of budget plan, because it's not really about the numbers that we're picking. This is a question of values, it's a question of choices, it's a question of the direction of the state. Main point is this: we spend too much money in the state of New York. That is my profound economic conclusion, I want you to know. This chart says it all. When you look at over the past 10 years, okay, this is the past decade, spending in the state has increased about 5.7% per year over those 10 years. Tax receipts, which is how much money is coming in, went up about 3.8% per year. Personal income growth, people in the state were making 3.7%, and inflation was at 2.4%, which means you were more than double the rate of spending, double the inflation rate at 5.7%. And just the 5.7 to 3.8. It means you were spending more money than you were bringing in terms of tax receipts. And there is a very basic economic rule. I don't know if you've gotten to this yet in Nazareth. You cannot spend more money than you make, okay? There are only two groups who are having trouble understanding this lesson. One is the legislature of the state of New York. The other are my three daughters. Good news is I'm making more progress with my daughters than I am with the state legislature. But this really says it all. And not only is this 10 years, this has been going on a long, long time, my friends. Now, because we spend too much, we tax too much. When you look at the tax situation in New York, $4,800, the per capita state and local tax burden, 66% above the U.S. average. The worst among states, meaning what? Meaning that businesses can close their laptop and they can move. Means young people can get on a plane and fly to a part of the country where they think they're actually developing jobs. And it's not just state and local taxes. The property taxes, I believe, in many ways are the most dangerous and destructive tax that we have in this state. $3,700 is the median, 96% higher than the U.S. average. And this starts the downward spiral. Businesses leave. When the businesses leave, the people leave. When the businesses and people leave, there's less revenue. You have to raise taxes. The more you raise taxes, the more businesses leave. That is the downward spiral. That is the negative synergy that is now happening to the state. Over 2 million people have left the state of New York because of this. More in upstate New York than downstate New York. This is what has to be stopped. Now, you could argue that, well, we spend a lot of money in taxes, but we actually get a lot for what we spend. We spend a lot of money, but we have excellent performance from our government programs. You could argue that. You'd be wrong, but you could argue that. The opposite is actually true. We are the #1 spending state in terms of education. We are number 34 in terms of results. We're #1 in spending in health care, Medicaid, number 21 in results. We spend $1.6 billion annually in economic development. We're dead last in terms of creating jobs. Why? How can this be? Why is Albany doing this? Well, when you pull back the curtain on Albany, you will see a government that is really controlled by the special interests. And it has been for a long time. When it comes to doing the Albany budget, I call it Albany meets Enron. Now, I was Attorney General for 4 years, and I spent 4 years uncovering scandals and sort of industry-wide scandals. We came up with one scandal where the health insurance was actually setting its own rates on reimbursement to consumers. We did scandals on Wall Street where they were actually setting the values of the homes and the home mortgages, which started the whole meltdown. We did a big investigation on student loans where banks were ripping off college students in setting the rates, the interest rates, and the colleges were getting a kickback. This is like that. This is like that. There is an industry that is manipulating the state budget and where that money goes. The state budget is $133 billion. That is a lot of money. And when you have that much money and that much power, there are powerful forces that are organized, that arrange to manipulate it. And that's what's happening in Albany today. The budget is driven by rates and formulas in law that give certain groups and industries' unsustainable annual increases. A lot of words, but that says it all. And many of these rates and laws are put in there by special interests and their lobbyists that dominate Albany. So, for example, two big programs that the state operates, Medicaid and education. And they're in the budget, and every year they go up. And every year there's a projected rate of growth for the increase in Medicaid and education when they do the budget. What do you think the state agreed to last year when they did the budget? What do you think the projected rate of growth in Medicaid and education was? Normal rate of growth is rate of inflation, you could say, right? Be about 2% now. Maybe they were generous and they said 4%. Maybe it was 5, maybe it was 6, maybe it was 7. 13% increase in Medicaid and a 13% increase in education. That is the problem. You can't afford a 13% increase. That's what forces the state to increase taxes, and that's what starts that negative cycle all over again. Well, maybe that was a snapshot. No, it's been going on for years. The Medicaid costs 14% and 16% over the past couple of years. Going forward, it's 13% and it's 9% the year after. Education, the same thing, 13 and 11. Nothing is going up by 13%. Nothing is going up by 11%. Not people's income, not people's house value, nothing is going up that percent. And no one is in a position to be able to afford these increases. The rates of growth are unsustainable, they're unnecessary, and they're unjustifiable. There's a concept called the permanent government. You fertile minds. There was a great author named Jack Newfield. He was a great reporter for a newspaper in New York City called the Village Voice and then for the New York Post. And he wrote a book called The Permanent Government. He passed away, but he was very influential to me. He was a friend of my father, and I spent many nights at the kitchen table listening to him. And his point was, it's not really about Democrats and Republicans. There is a permanent corporate special interest establishment that manipulates and controls the government. And he is right. I was in state government many, many years ago. There was another Cuomo who was governor, by the way. Did you know that, you guys? You didn't know that. I'm getting old. I'm old so very fast. Actually, there was. If you go way back in the history books, you will find, go to the internet, you'll find, they'll be cached many years ago, but there was a governor. Many, you know when they did the Erie Canal? There was a governor. His name was Mario Cuomo, and he is my father. He becomes governor in 1982, a long time ago. And I was very, very young at the time, I really was. Even I was young once. I went to Albany with my father. I was 23, 24 years old, and I was special assistant to the governor, and I spent the first year or so there. And I was in the Capitol, and I met a lot of people and a lot of lobbyists who would be in certain areas across the Capitol. I now go back as governor myself. Many things have changed, except the same lobbyists are in the same positions that they were when I was there in 1982, 1983. That's the permanent government. And that's what we're really fighting here. And that's what this battle is all about. You're trying to change a culture, you're trying to change relationships, you're trying to change a way of doing business, and you're trying to change people who now control large amounts of money who want to keep it that way. And that's what this budget battle is really joining. Now, what's even more infuriating in all of this is none of this is about the people. One word you never hear in all of this conversation is never about the people. We talk about the Medicaid program. Nobody's talking about patients. Nobody's talking about wellness or about success rates. You talk about education. All this debate about education. You ever hear anyone talking about the students or the achievement rate or graduation rates? No. It's all about the industry of education that the argument is going on. That's the discussion that we're having, and that's what has to change. That is a special interest-dominated conversation. The way they do the budget even misleads the public the way they talk about it. 13% increase in Medicaid, 13% increase in education. In the past, you've heard about a governor cutting the budget. You know what cut means? Anything less than a 13% increase is a cut. So when they increased Medicaid 10% instead of 13%, that was a 3% cut. Only in Albany is that a 3% cut. It's a 10% increase. That's part of this. We have a $10 billion deficit in this state. I'm trying to close a $10 billion deficit. That assumes you fund Medicaid and education at the 13% increase. That's how they calculate the deficit. I reject the notion that that is the deficit because I reject the 13% increase in Medicaid and education as an unreal manipulation that would seek to extort more tax money from the people of the state of New York. So I reject this notion. If you put Medicaid and education, the two cost drivers, if they went up at the rate of inflation, the state doesn't have a $10 billion deficit, it has a $1 billion deficit. It's a totally different problem. All of this has been going on for years. You saw the numbers for the past 10 years. This has been the dynamic for decades. But we've been getting away with it, plus or minus. Our competitiveness has been hurt. The position that this state has been in vis-a-vis the other states has been hurt. But we've gotten away with it, plus or minus. Now the chickens come home to roost. Why? Because now the economy slowed. And when the economy slows, then the scams all rise. You notice how the Madoff scam and all these Ponzi scams are now starting to appear. They got away with it for so long. Now all of a sudden they appear. Why? Because many of these scams are dependent on more money coming in. And when the new money stops because the economy slows, the scams are exposed. This budget scam for the state of New York is just like that. When we were making money hand over fist, we could get away with it. Now we can't, and now it's a crisis. We have to redesign the programs to make them actually work for people. We have to recalibrate our spending so that it can be affordable, and we need to get the economy going once again in the state of New York because that's the main problem. We're going to take the Medicaid program. We took the best minds in the state to redesign the program and cut the waste and cut the abuse. Where's the waste? Here's an example. Largest single area in Medicaid, growing area, is called home health care, which is a good idea. Home health care is we'll send the health care to the home rather than the person to a nursing home or to a hospital. It is exploding in cost. It's gone up about 90% from 2003 to 2009. The way the program works, more than 50 cents on the dollar goes to administrative overhead to groups who are running the program. Has nothing to do with the caregiver, nothing to do with the patient. Over 50% to the groups, quote unquote. Who are the groups? The groups are the groups who hired the lobbyist, who got it written into the budget and designed the program in a way that they're making a lot of money. We also have to recalibrate Medicaid, which will go from $53 billion down to $52 billion, which is a 2% cut. 2% doesn't sound like a major cut. It's the first time the program has been cut in decades, and it is a cut that the industry says is going to be very difficult to reach. Even with a 2% cut, my argument is when you look at the rate of inflation and the amount the costs have gone up in Medicaid, even with a 2% cut over the past 10, 11 years, it's still gone up 5.7%, which is a very healthy rate of growth. Going forward, rather than having a 13% increase, we want to recalibrate it to a 4% increase, which is roughly what they call the National Health Care CPI, so it's a national index. We want good health care. We want the program to pay what it needs to pay, but we want it to pay a fair and honest amount. Indexing it to CPI will actually do that. In education, we want to change the orientation. This is how public schools now work. School districts get a block grant from the state. Meaning what? Meaning they get a formula grant. A school district, based on its size and a formula, let's say a school district is going to get $150,000, which is a small number, but $150,000. The school district gets $150,000, whatever it does. If it has a great year and it increases all sorts of performance, it gets $150,000. If it has a terrible year and the grades all go backwards, it still gets $150,000. If you believe in performance, why don't you incentivize the performance? If you believe in performance, pay for performance. So we want to set up 2 performance funds, a $250 million grant program, which will give bonuses to the school districts and the schools and the principals and the teachers who do the best job increasing the academic achievement of the students. So if the students' grades go up relative to where they were, if they go up and the achievement goes up, we'll give you a bonus. Why? Because we want to recognize the performance and we want to recognize the achievement. We want to reward it. We want to find out what that school is doing that works. We want to copy it in the other school districts. Likewise, we'll give a performance bonus to school districts that save money. Management efficiency, consolidations, who can operate the school most cost efficiently, that is something to be identified and to be rewarded, and we'd have a $250 million fund that does that also. In terms of recalibrating spending, state now spends $52.9 billion on education. We would reduce state aid about 7%. When state aid is put together with local aid, because most of the schools, public schools, are funded from local tax dollars, when you put those 2 funds together, the overall cut would be 2.9% year to year. Now, 2.9%. That means you want schools to reduce their budget. Yes, I want them to reduce their budget 2.9%. I want the Medicaid budget to be reduced 2%. That's very hard. Yes, I understand that is very hard. I also understand life is options, and we don't have any. The option would be, well, raise taxes and give the schools more money. Raise taxes and give Medicaid more money. No. Because if we raise the taxes, then we're right back down to that negative spiral. And by the way, I reject the premise that you can't find 2% of efficiencies. I reject the premise. Education and Medicaid have gotten historic double-digit increases for the past 10 years. I don't believe you can't find 2% savings. I believe you don't want to find 2% savings. I believe it's not an easy exercise, but I don't believe you can't. And by the way, in terms of leading by example, I'll go first, and the state government is going to take a 10% reduction. 10% reduction. I already reduced, upon taking office, I already reduced the governor's office budget 5% on taking office. Is it going to be hard? Yes. Yes, it's hard to find economies, it's hard to find efficiencies. It's easier to run an organization when every year you're getting more money. But that's not an option. And when I say, and this is now a very hot topic, by the way, in Albany, you'll open the newspaper and you'll see the many groups are calling me many names that they don't teach you in Nazareth, okay? They didn't teach me at Fordham either, I want you to know. Why? Because it's hard. But this is what I say to my colleagues in government who say I can't cut 2%, I can't cut 2.9%. Every family in this state, every business in this state has gone through this exercise. The economy has turned, and it has turned for 2 years, 3 years. And every family had to sit around that kitchen table and say, how do we make ends meet? And maybe we don't take the vacation. And maybe we keep the car longer. Or maybe we have to take a loan because we can't pay the college tuition. And it is wrong that only government officials are going to sit around and say, we're immune from the economic cycle. And I know everyone else had to take a reduction, everyone else had to find efficiencies, but we're going to insist that we can't find any money. The education system is so well managed, it's a fine Swiss watch. And there is not 2% of inefficiency in this system. I don't believe it. And any of them who really believe it, I said, bring me the budget. And let's sit down, let's see if I can find 2% of the waste. Because the alternative is to go to the people of this state and say, we're taxing you more, and I am not going to do that. Period. To give you an idea of where we can find money from the education front. Schools all have reserve funds that have been funded by the state over the years. There's about $1.2 billion in reserves funded by the schools. The entire cut that we're talking about is $1.5 billion, okay? So they almost have that amount of money in the reserves. There's $600 million in federal money from last year that was not spent. Maybe we look at the salaries of the administrators and the raises that the administrators have been getting. Administrators, by the way, and superintendents are one of those groups that are using unkind words about me. This is why. Some school superintendents earn $300,000 a year. There's a school superintendent on Long Island makes $500,000 per year, all in. 279 school superintendents, roughly 40%, receive a salary $200,000 or higher, okay? Their argument is they have hard jobs. They have to manage a budget, they have to manage a lot of people, and they have to deal with a lot of politicians. To them I say, I have to manage a budget, I have to manage people, and I really have to deal with a lot of politicians. I don't understand why they get paid more than I do. That's what I don't understand. We're going to have to think about a wage freeze for management and teachers. We're going to have to think about management and teachers paying more of their health costs. If the teachers paid the same percentage for their health costs that state employees pay, it would be roughly half the amount of reduction that we're talking about. And we're going to have to talk about consolidating back office school functions. Everyone is very concerned, as they should be, about what happens in the classroom. That doesn't mean you can't consolidate back office functions, payroll, purchasing, accounting, etc., and find savings that way. Going forward, we're going to have to find a formula for education aid increases that we can live with. Once again, I would use the increase in personal income growth, which is about 4%. State operations, as I mentioned, we're going to go through a comprehensive review of the state government itself, and we'll be coming up with 10% savings. With our workforce, we need to find $450 million in savings, and we're going to be working with the labor unions on that. Worst case scenario, something nobody wants, would be laying off 9,800 workers. One of the places the state wants to find money is by closing prison facilities, which is actually a good thing. When you're closing prison cells, this is good news. The other Cuomo governor, do you remember his name? What was his name? Very good. You redeemed yourselves, said Nazareth. During his tenure, he built a large number of prisons. Why? Because there was a demographic curve, and there were a lot of young males, predominantly, who were in their 20s. There was a spike in the number of crimes committed, spike in the number of people going to prison, and he built a large number of jail cells. We're now on the other side of that curve, and we have fewer people going to prison. We actually have a 21% decline. We have about 14,000 fewer people in prison, which means we can close some of these prisons and prison cells, which are very expensive, and I want to close 3,500 prison cells and save money that way. I also want to redesign the juvenile justice system in this state, which is something that should have been done years and years ago. Juvenile justice system is basically a prison system for juveniles. Juvenile gets into trouble. Not that anyone here in this room has to worry about this, except two of you in the back, and I know who you are. Juvenile gets into trouble. They go into the state juvenile justice system. The cost per individual is $250,000 per year to the state, and the recidivism rate is over 90%. So look at what you're doing. You're paying $250,000 from the taxpayers to put a young person in an institution. The institution, if anything, is making it worse with a 90% recidivism rate. Can't be worse. There are community-based alternatives that are cheaper, where the evidence shows they're actually better, and it's time we redesign and recalibrate the juvenile justice system in this state. And finally, it's about rebuilding the economy and getting the economy running again. We have to do these cuts short term, but long term we have to grow the economy, and that's the only way these numbers are going to work and this state is going to prosper. Economic development is going to be our focus. The great former mayor of Rochester, Lieutenant Governor Bob Duffy, chairs 10 regional economic development councils. People talk about developing the economy. I spent 8 years in Washington doing this under Bill Clinton. Did you ever hear of Bill Clinton? Oh, that's good. There is no one state economy. There are regional economies across the state. And if you want to develop the economy, you have to develop it region by region. And we'll put together regional councils. We're in the process of doing that now, and they'll be chaired by the Lieutenant Governor. To end where we began, we are at a crossroads, and the choice is ours. One road is the road to ruin, and one road is the road to recovery. Now, this will be hard to do, and I do not mean to slight in any way how dramatic these changes are, because they are dramatic. And change itself is very difficult to do. We were just chatting about it inside. Change is a fascinating phenomenon you'll see as you get older. Everybody says they want change. You ever notice that? In any situation, people want change. In the classroom, people want changes. In the school, people want changes. They'll show up, they'll demonstrate, they'll yell for change. Everybody wants change. In personal relationships, everybody wants change. Friendships, people want change. Husbands and wives, every morning, they want change. Bob Duffy and Bob Duffy, they want change. They want change. But what they really mean is they want you to change. See? They don't say it that way. They say, we need to change. But really they mean you need to change. People, for themselves, are very adverse to change. We want control. We want to keep things just the way they are. We want to change the rest of the world. That's not what this is about. This says we all have to be part of that change. This is not just the state government over there in Albany. This is every school district across the state. This is the entire healthcare system across the state. These are county governments, town governments, city governments all across the state. This really is a massive change, and changing a pattern that has been developed over decades. And it is going to be hard. But that's how you grow at the same time, right? If there's ever a time for us to do it, this is the time that we're going to do it. This is the time. The crisis is now. The crossroads is now. As the old expression, it's now or never. It is now or never. Because if we don't change, you're going to keep increasing those taxes. You're going to see more businesses and more young people leaving. And we will be further and further down the spiral. The flip side is also true. If we do what we're talking about doing here, we will fundamentally change the trajectory of this state. If we're successful in this plan, we will have stopped unsustainable spending, closed this year's $10 billion deficit, stopped next year's deficit from forming in the first place, which hasn't been done in over 30 years. We will have closed the deficit with no new taxes, no borrowing, no gimmicks. We will have started to redesign these programs to actually work for people once again and talk about performance funding and Medicaid that actually increases health and education that actually increases performance. And we'll focus on real economic growth and getting jobs coming back to this state once again. I believe if we do this, we will reposition New York nationally. And we can say, take a second look at New York. It's not what you thought. We are the business-friendly state. We want the businesses here. We're not taxing you out of your homes, and we're not taxing you out of this state. We're a smarter, more efficient, more active government than we've ever been before. That, my friends, is the road to recovery, and that takes you. Because why? Because change comes when the people of this state demand change. It is that simple. Democracy works when the people are engaged and the people are active. And if you don't speak up, and if you don't act, they're going to keep doing the same thing they've been doing year after year after year. Those lobbyists in the hallway will win the day. And they win the day because they fill the void that the people create. When people say, how did it get this bad? What happened to Albany? This didn't happen overnight. Couldn't get this bad overnight. This was year after year after year. This was an apathetic public that gave up. I need you to step up. And I need you to make your voice heard. The politicians will listen. Politicians are very good listeners. Don't kid yourself. They hear very well. They hear the people very well. It's natural selection. It goes back to Darwin. Politicians who don't hear the people are not politicians for long. It's political evolution. But you have to speak up. You know what the special interests are saying in Albany right now? We're going to get through this. They hear my plan. They hear my speech. Talking about change. You know what they're thinking? They know what change needs to be made. They want to change the governor. That's what they're thinking. You have to speak up. You have to speak up. Government is a very powerful force. And it's not some alien being. Government is us organized into a format to decide what we want our world to be. That's all it is. Assembly, Senate, governors, lieutenant governors. No, it's people coming together into an organized format to make decisions for all of us and to decide what kind of state we have. If you want to change that state, you want to be part of that discussion, then you have to get in. And I need you to be part of that conversation. And if you speak up, we will change this state. And we're not just going to bring it back to the old days when they had those old people, Mario Cuomo and all those old days. I believe this state can be better and stronger than it's ever been. Those 8 years I spent in Washington, I worked in every state in the nation, literally. And I know everything else that is out there. No state has what we have here. No state has what we have in New York. No one has these assets. Nobody has the geography. Nobody has the diversity. Nobody has the healthcare universities. Nobody has the higher ed system. Nobody has the workforce. Nobody has what we have in New York. The one thing we haven't had is a government as good as the people of this state, and a government who has been there for the people of this state, a government of efficiency and integrity, a government that actually demanded performance. That's what we haven't had, and that's what this change is all about, and I need you to make it possible and make it a reality. Thank you, and God bless you.